Get yourself in the lotus position, because I've got no plan, no pretense, and definitely no bypassing. I'm Josh Connolly, and this will probably be dysfunctional. So here we are. It is the first ever episode of Dysfunctional, and I cannot tell you how much thought has gone into how do I start the podcast? Do I go lively, capture you in, act all excited? Do I fucking try and just start talking randomly in the middle of the sentence to try and be different? What do I do? So I've just decided to say welcome to Dysfunctional and not get too hung up on it. And I try fucking as much as I can actually in my life to not get too hung up on anything, and in many ways I feel like that's why I've been able to do a lot of the work that I do, because I'm a massive so a lot of what I'm going to say, by the way, will contradict itself. I'm a massive overthinker, but I also recognize that in order to get things done, I need to not overthink things. So I just do it, and most of the things that I do in my life I do with fear. And I'm terrified of it, but I fucking just do it anyway and see what happens. And you know, a lot of people say that the saying is, isn't it, feel the fear and do it anyway. There might even be a book out called Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway. But that's the true meaning of fearlessness, is not the absence of fear, it's feeling the fear and doing it anyway. And as you'll see, I'm already down off on a little bit of a tangent, and that's the idea of this podcast. That's what I want this podcast to be. It's an opportunity for me to show up truly as I am, because there's a level on social media, there's a level of I get a lot of love for being authentic and for being like my true self and showing up however I am. And I really do try to convey that message when I'm online. But however you look at it, particularly with short form content creation online, there's a level of creation that goes into it. Now, some or a lot of the content that I post is actually me speaking live on an Instagram live and then just chopping that up and putting that out. But still, when I'm in front of people, there is always a level of performance. You have to just recognize that there's a level of that. And so longer form content in the style of a podcast, I just feel will give me more opportunity to explore who I am a little bit more and get across who I am. And I want to try and do this. I'm going to try and do this every week. I'm going to show up. There's no script, right? There's no real plan. As you can see, I've got my iPad here. Well, you won't be able to see if you're listening to the podcast, but if you're watching on YouTube, you can see it. And on my iPad, my notes for today are why the pod, how did we get here, and wrap up. That's it. That's literally what I've written on there. But I also, a lot of people have somebody in the background that they can when they want to search something online, they can get them to search it. I don't have anybody in the background. So if I do want to search anything online, and I think as I get a bit more confident doing this, I will do that, but I don't know if you'll see me searching anything online today. But I want to show up every week, and I want to try and show up when I do show up on the pod. I want to try and show up in the energy that I'm in. And that's not easy, because with any level of content creation, with any level of getting across something that you want to get across, right? Conveying a message in the way that we see in the world today, through content, there is that slight level of performance or whatever you want to call. And so I want to just try and show up as authentically as I can here. And what you'll find is, I've got a very scattered mind. Sometimes I'm manic, and I'll be just joking and all over the place and jumping around, and that's how I show up. And then sometimes I'm just really people will think I'm chilled, but I'm probably just disassociated and zoned out. And sometimes, by the way, over the course of the time that I'm recording, I'll flip between all of those things, and that's all right too. And that's I guess the initial reason, or one of the reasons why I want to make the podcast in this way, and why I've made it a solo cast in the way that I have. And then secondly, a lot of the work that I'm doing in my life today, and a lot of the kind of message that I want to convey into the world is that as I have grown my own platform, as I have grown my stature in the space, or, you know, grown who I am, right? As a person within the wellness space, within the wellness industry. And listen, I am a rebel, right? So I do take a level of pleasure in going against the grain. There is a part of me that this happens in my own life, right? But it also happens in the spaces that I operate in, when everything's all swimmingly and everything's just going well. There is a part of me that's like, I want to throw a grenade in this and just see what happens, because I'm drawn to that kind of chaos, right? So there's a level of that in me, but there's also a level of that. I see a lot of like pretense in the wellness space. I see a lot of people charging a shit ton of money, while simultaneously suggesting that they want to help the everyday person on the street. Now, listen, there's a caveat to that, right? There's a major caveat to that. And that is, in order to be able to do this full time, right? For anybody to be able to work in this space and operate in this space full time, you have to earn enough money to be able to live, right? So I do understand that, particularly like I'm fortunate, right? In that well, not fortunate, yeah, but also I've worked really hard to build up the platform and the stuff that I've got now. So I don't want to be too arrogant and just sit from my perch going, you know, I fucking charge less money because I'm just better than everybody else. It's not like, I understand that when you have a bigger platform, there's the ability to be able to do that. But I have done that, you know, I've also done that since I started out. I think there's lots of different reasons why it happens. I think people lose their way. It's not easy, man. It's not easy to not get caught up in chasing the things that you never came here to chase. Financial resources, to not easy to not chase validation and fuck. That's not easy, man. I'm telling you, even when I look at when I first started, yeah. So it's been nearly a decade now since I walked into Nakoa. It'll be 10 years, I think, in 2025. And that was when I first started sharing my story publicly, right? Before then, I didn't have social media. I didn't use it. Like in the kind of normal way that social media is used, I don't like it. It makes me feel very uncomfortable. Like being that connected with people all of the time, right? So like, if I'm out in my personal life, I don't feel the urge to take a picture or to share what I'm doing like with the world in that way. So that's why I never used to have social media. Now, listen, I love what we're able to do with social media in today's world. And I think actually social media is not the problem in many respects. It's the misuse of it. And why do we misuse social media in the way that we do? Actually, I think when you scratch the surface and go beyond that, you'll find that it's a reaction to something. It's a reaction to an internal pain. And look, I think that, by the way, that's like any addiction, right? Alcohol addiction, drug addiction. It's not that if you have alcohol addiction, and obviously I've been through that myself, it's not that the alcohol doesn't cause you any problems. You just create this cocktail, pun intended. You just create this cocktail of issues, right? But the use of alcohol itself in alcohol addiction, in every case, is my belief, is an attempt at a solution. And so I think the same is true with social media, right? But when I found Nakoa 10 years ago, and I started sharing my story, I see this now looking back retrospectively. I don't think I knew it necessarily consciously at the time, but I started sharing my story everywhere, right? And I was like really sort of getting so much validation from being seen. I'd spent my whole life And I didn't know, again, I didn't know it. I'd spent my whole life feeling like I wasn't seen, like I was like hiding all of the time. And I feel like that's probably still a big part of who I am, is that I hide. And again, that's why I kind of like, like being able to share in the way that I do. But I was getting all of this validation, and I was kind of like, what I was doing is saying that I just want to help people in the way that I share. But actually, I think for the first maybe year or two, I was driven almost entirely by this kind of sense of validation, this sense of being truly seen that I was getting, right? That I obviously felt like I hadn't been getting before in my life. And I think back, like I used to love X Factor, right? And Britain's Got Talent, less so Britain's Got Talent, but X Factor and Pop Stars Survivals and stuff like that when it was before. And I used to wonder why I loved it so much. I used to get quite emotional anytime, someone would do their performance and everybody would stand up and give a massive, round of applause, and they'd get a standing ovation and stuff. And it used to make me really emotional when I watched it. And looking back, I recognize it's because there's two things. One, they got their moment in the sun, right? And I always felt like I wanted my moment in the sun, particularly back in the day when I was drinking and I was like struggling with life so much in the way that I was. I used to cause people around me, or I certainly felt like I did. I used to cause people a lot of pain. I caused myself a lot of pain. I couldn't show up to myself or other people in the way that I wanted to. But there's somewhere in me, there was a sense that I wasn't a bad person and that there was something more for me. But I just had no idea what that would look like. So like there was a bit of that in there. But then also, it was seeing people, like in X Factor, you'd have somebody who like struggles without their life, but they have this one thing, they have this one outlet, and when they sing, it all goes away. And I yearned for that, man. I yearned for that presence that I could see that they got when they sang. And I started to get that when I started to speak in the way that I speak, the public speaking that I was doing at the time with Nicole. And I did a lot of like national stuff and things like that. But like I said, I was running ultimately then on that validation and on that being seen. And I became addicted to it. Like I just get addicted to everything and obsessed with it. And I wonder, actually, as I'm saying that, I wonder if that's some of what we see online, some of what you see online, which is that kind of the validation. The posting was like the going on social media, sharing my story. Each and every time somebody said that they resonated, it just made me feel so seen and so heard. And I framed it as like, I just want to help everybody. I just want to be there. I want to do this to help everybody else. But that's not necessarily what was driving me. That drive has always been there, right? I've always like over-egged the pudding in terms of like, wanting to please and help everybody else. But it was about me in those initial years, And I think that changed. Like, I left my job 6 years ago to start doing the work that I'd done. And I think somewhere in between doing all that public speaking, I started to realize that some of the things that I said were of value. And I hadn't seen that before. I hadn't seen that there was value in how I viewed the world. I've always known that I view the world differently. I think we all view the world through a different lens, right? I'd be too cliche, but our eyes are more projectors actually than they are lenses, right? So like who we are as people, our inherent, innate personality mixed up in a massive cocktail with all of our life experiences shape the way that we see the world. But I just remember when I was a kid, like a teenager particularly, Well, no, I mean, actually, I remember like in my early years as a child, right? Just feeling like I saw stuff that why is nobody talking about it? Why is nobody like, I just felt so confused all of the time. And look, I grew up initially in that initial phase, particularly when, in the life that I lived with my dad. My mum and my dad separated when I was young, but in those initial years with my dad, and by the way, I have to hypothesize to some degree around my experiences when I was a child. I have a sense that I can feel some of these memories that I talk about, but I can't necessarily recall them. And I trust that nowadays. But I have a sense that I just remember being so confused and not understanding why people weren't talking about things that were happening. And like I say, when you grow up in dysfunction, people literally are sweeping stuff under the carpets. But I even remember when I used to get to school and we'd get taught stuff, and I would think, yeah, but like you say this and this, but I would see something else and I'd be like, but that can't be true if this is true. And I remember adults particularly getting frustrated with me, and it made me just think that I was weird. And like a lot of people say the sort of neurodivergent conversation, which is like relatively new really when you think about it. And I definitely feel like I probably fall into that category, but I don't necessarily personally like to frame my own experience that way, or I haven't found the value in doing that for myself. But I just remember, those difficult questions that I would ask. Like I was highly, highly curious, highly, highly inquisitive, and the adults would be pissed off with me, man. Why you always got to ask such stupid questions? They would say, yeah, like why, like what, like it doesn't have to be like that. And so that was like metaphorically like beaten out of me as a kid, and then so I rediscovered the value in my curiosity as I got older. As I, particularly, once I started doing the public speaking and stuff like that, and I found a way to begin to articulate and convey how I felt, what I truly felt, what those feelings were. And ultimately that curiosity and the questions that I ask, because if you look at like the work that I do today, if you look at the way that I answer people's questions online, if you ever see me in person and stuff like that, I don't actually answer questions. I don't really, if somebody asks for advice, I don't really give any advice. What I do is unpack people's experiences, and I do that with a curiosity, and then give it back to them and say, you make the decision, or you need to think about that, because ultimately I think that's what people want, right? And so yeah, somewhere earlier on I was talking about my issues with the wellness industry. And so like as a result of like, I think that the wellness industry like lacks authenticity in that way, because there's fucking loads of reasons in there. Like there's the kind of the quote unquote madness of crowds that you see happening, and how you see this online, man. Like I had a 2 and 8, right? I had a bit of a run-in with somebody on LinkedIn fairly recently. And he's like quite a prominent figure in the space that he operates in. I'm not going to go into who it was. But what was interesting is that he does really well on LinkedIn, right? He gets a lot of he's done well. And when I sort of had a bit of a run-in with him over something that he said, and he got all funny about it, quite a few people were DMing me. I got a lot, actually, tens of messages, like probably up in sort of 20 or 30 messages from people, which is quite a lot, right? But what I realized is that a lot of them were talking about like how they had had a similar experience with him. But what I noticed is that some of them were still favorably commenting on his stuff, right? Which is interesting, isn't it? Like, you've had this experience with this person, but you're still interacting in that way. And so that happens in like society, doesn't it? So social media is just like a slightly more abnormal reflection of society in many ways, I think. We end up like following what people say and going along with it and agreeing with it, even if our body doesn't match up to that. And I think so. Like, I think the wellness space plays into that. And look, I'm not suggesting for a second that I'm free of that. I'm sure it does go on. I can feel a part of me going, but I am fucking not like that. I'd like to think I'm not. I'm like, but you do have to check yourself, right? By the way, you do have to check yourself when you gain a following online of people that really trust you. They trust in what you say. Like, I know that. I have my people that I trust in what I say, you know, like the likes of Gabor Mate and Bessel van der Kolk and Dick Schwartz, these kind of people who I love. You know, I hang off of a lot of the words that they say, right? So when we find teachers that we really relate to and that we feel speak for us, we do hang off of their every word. So then you have a level in that position, in the position that I'm in, you have a level of responsibility to check yourself regularly, because you can run away with it. Like, you can run away with it. Like, and it's not easy, because when you get a lot of like interaction on your content, right? For example, online, you get the trolls that turn up, and you know the ones that are there. They're passive aggressive. They fucking tend to call out your character and try and like pull you apart rather than actually pull your argument apart. But then you'll also get people on there that just have come on and they just genuinely disagree and have opened up a bit of a dialogue. And sometimes you'll end up coming down on them and being horrible to them. And then when you've got a following, like a pile-on happens if you're not careful. Your followers want to protect you and they can see that you've reacted. And then this pile-on happens. And it's not like, it's then down to me as an individual and to have a responsibility to make sure that I can call myself out on that when that stuff happens. Do you know what I mean? And stay on top of that. And so, yeah, like, I feel like I'm doing all right, actually. I feel like we're going all right. Well, I keep looking down here because we've got time on here. I don't know, I'm probably like 20, 25 minutes in. That's one of the things that I'll say about this podcast as well, is that where I won't overly plan them, they might be, one week they might be 15 minutes because I just don't have the energy or the gumph. What a word, by the way. Gumph. Not used enough, is it? Gumph. Gumph. I'm not even sure how you spell it. PH or F? Gumpf. Gumph. Yeah, so there'll be times when I'll do a podcast for an hour, and it will just be however I'm showing up. And I'll talk about whatever's going on in my life and whatever's going on in the world. And whatever I think needs to be in the podcast, it'll be in there. But we're going to show up once a week. That's the plan. And most of the time I'll be recording it sat here. I feel like I need a side table here, because my Pepsi Max, that upsets people. Somebody DM'd me on Instagram and said that an influencer, which is still not a term I'm very comfortable with, but an influencer in your space should not be drinking Pepsi Max. And it's true, right? This is where, by the way, like the authenticity thing comes into it as well, right? Because I drink energy drinks a little bit as well, right? And I kind of know that, like, you shouldn't really drink energy drinks and they're not good for you. And on the one hand, I'll be banging on about how I don't have sugar anymore because it makes me feel like I'm slightly better than you. It doesn't. I'll talk about why I've quit sugar in a second. But I know that, like, when I go live on Instagram and stuff like that, I've had an energy drink on the go, and I fucking won't drink it on the live because I know it's not very spiritual, is it? So as I sit here saying I'm wagering a bit of an attack on the wellness industry, I get it, because it's in us all, isn't it? Right? It is in us all. But But I just try as much as I can to show up to exactly as I am. I do drink probably a can or two a day of Coke Zero or Pepsi Max. Other brands are available. Why do we say that? I think in mainstream media, it's because you're not supposed to be seen to be promoting anyone. But Pepsi or Coke, if you're out there, I'll sell my fucking soul for a relationship with you to send me free fizzy drinks all of the time. I'll sell my soul. I'm joking. I'm joking. That's another thing as well. Like you get offered loads of stuff like that. Yeah, you get offered loads of stuff like that. And it's a perk, man. It's not bad. But like one of the only ones that I actually do stuff with at the moment is Supreme CBD. But that's because I love the product. But I am going to look at doing more and bringing in more because of this Belong. If you've not heard about Belong, is the community spaces that I want to bring in. I want to bring these community spaces in that have no barriers to entry. So financially, people can come, even if they've got no money, they can come. And then, we want no disability to be an issue or anything like that. And so to fund them, because I still want them to be in nice venues that in the work that I do, yeah, I see like in my online community, for example, I see real good humans, man. There's some great humans out there doing stuff on social media, raising awareness in the way that I do, right? There's lovely people doing that. But man, I fucking love, I know I talk about how I hate people, and I'm sort of semi-joking when I talk about that. I hate I do hate a lot of people. I do dislike a lot of people. I'm okay with that. I just know what I like. But I like humans, man. I like humans that that are human. And we've got loads of them in Breathing Space. I'm not going to start naming them. But I love humans that, and there's some great humans out there that are just trying to make their way, and they don't have the money that a lot of these wellness spaces want, but I feel like they deserve to go to some of these amazing venues and have these experiences too. So how do we find ways to make that accessible? And yeah, that's why I'll take on a few more brand collaborations now, only if I see the value in them and if I genuinely believe in them. And then some of the money that we bring in from that can help to fund some of these spaces, so that we can give those nice, decent human beings some space like that. And that's what I want to do. I want to, I see, when I say no pretense, and I have a pop at the spirituality stuff. Now, let me just be clear, right? I make jokes about I'll judge a character by their ability to have a bit of a laugh, right? I dislike nothing more than being around people. And by the way, you meet people like this in the fucking wellness industry all the time, yeah? Or the spiritual community all the time. Like they're portraying this kind of free, loving spirit, and then you meet them and you just feel like you've got to fucking walk on eggshells. I can't, really intense people. And you just feel like when you're around them, if I put a foot wrong here, they're fucking gonna go over. I struggle with that, man. I love people that have the ability to laugh at themselves at the drop of a hat. They're my kind of people, yeah, who make a joke about everything. They're the type of people that I want to be around. And when it comes to spirituality, people say to me, people are sometimes a bit awkward talking about their spiritual practice around me because they think that, I love spirituality, man. Spirituality saved my life. I got sober in 12 steps. If you don't know what 12 steps are, and I still go, by the way, if you don't know what 12 steps are, it's a spiritual practice. It's about the 12 steps take you on a journey. Their primary purpose is to take you on a journey to develop a relationship with something, a power greater than you. I've got that, man. I have that. I just don't need to convey it anymore. It's a personal thing that connects me to people in another way, And I do have a belief that there's something greater than me, that there is an ultimate reality that's beyond I was gonna say beyond our contraception. That's not the word, is it? The word is beyond. I got 6 kids. I don't know a great deal about that. If do I clearly beyond conception, beyond our conception. Fucking hell. I've made a commitment saying I'll not edit any of this. I'm not going to edit any of this. I'm just going to put it out. This is just fucking me. This is what you're going to get on this podcast. Me. I want to give you as much insight into how my head works. I've got a million things bouncing about in there all of the time in my head. Yeah. And sometimes it's exciting. Sometimes I find it fucking hard, man. You know, I talk a lot about how I crave to be on my own, and I love my own, being on my own and having my own space, and being in my own company. And I do love it, man. I love it until I don't. And then I fucking really struggle with it. And, you know, there's nothing quite as scary as being alone in my head and where my head goes with that. Because like, I do struggle like with life, man. I have to live in the day. You know, when you go to the 12-step programs I was just talking about at the beginning, they talk about quitting drink a day at a time, and I'm sort of 12 and a half years into that. So I don't quit alcohol a day at a time. Like, I don't say I won't make sure I don't drink today. I don't do that. So I don't really think about it. But I do have to live in the day. I have to live in the day with most of it. I have to live in the day in the way that I work. I have to live in the day in life in general. Like I say to people, if somebody came in here now and said you're going to live till 80, I'd be like, oh my, fuck, 80. It's like, I've got more time on this earth than I've done. The concept, the idea of that feels too much to me. Life in its entirety feels too much to me. But when you break it down and you draw it down and you scope it back and you bring it back to today, how do you feel about today? That's way more manageable. Life itself feels unmanageable when I zoom out too far. And so the same is true in my work. The same is true as in my personal relationships, right? If I come away from living in the day and I try and look at them in their entirety, I'll think, what's the fucking use anyway? What's the point? What's the point in me putting the effort into this today? Because there's no way I'm going to be able to stick at it for the rest of my life. There's no way. Not me, not dysfunctional fucking me. But zoom in again. And can I get through today? Can dysfunctional me get through today? I mean, it still don't fucking seem... Still doesn't necessarily seem reachable every day, but it feels more reachable. And so I do think that. I think that if you're like me, whatever that is, what is being like me? Sensitive, intuitive, fucking fast-paced, loud mind. And it's weird, isn't it? Because Western culture, Western society wants you to be up in your head. Like that's where they think the solutions are. Like even a lot of Western therapy, and I love therapy, right? I think that I know people that swear by it and stuff like that. With sitting one-to-one, therapy, coaching, any of it, one-to-one for me is not, it's not my favorite. I like doing it in community, shoulder to shoulder in groups. That's what works for me. But even a lot of like Western therapy as it's known, it's like, how do we get up in your head? How do we rationalize it? And if we do this enough and regularly enough, then you won't have to be in your body and you won't have to feel it. And you can go, oh yeah, somebody abused the shit out of me when I was a kid, but it made me who I am today. And, I can feel that my body doesn't really match up with my head when I say that. But if I say it enough and keep saying it and don't let anybody else say any different, then I won't have to feel uncomfortable. I fucking see that a lot. And that's why, by the way, I think I see, when people like can't let you have your difficult emotions. It's because when you have your difficult emotions and present the idea that you may be okay with that, and you may have reached a place where you feel comfortable even with that, well, that makes the people that are bypassing and not doing it, what makes them fucking wholly uncomfortable, doesn't it? Naturally, right? Because you're bringing an emotion that they're trying to run away from, so they feel uncomfortable. So rather than think, wow, why do I feel uncomfortable at the presentation of this emotion or this response? They have to push you down, right? They have to shut you down and make you fucking, you're crazy, you're stupid. I need you rationalizing the shit out of stuff with me so that I get to feel more comfortable. And you see that with spirituality, by the way. We're all guilty of that, right? Like, we come up with these spiritual concepts and then we fucking waste our lives. Even so, my favorite is probably, like, at the moment, my favorite framework, should we call it that, and way of making sense of who I am is to understand all of the parts of myself. But if you're not careful, you're fucking spending your whole life in a part of yourself that believes that you need to break down and see the part of yourself all of the time. And then you're just in it all of the time, man. And like we want to do the work. I want to do the work. I do want to work. I'm trying to do the work. Try to free myself as much as I can. And let's not get lost in that. You think, like, if we want to try and love ourselves unconditionally, think of the way that you're supposed to love a child unconditionally. And how do you do that? You love them first. When a child makes a mistake and does something bad, you love them first, right? I still love you. I know you've messed up. You made a mistake. We all do that. It doesn't make me love you any less. And then maybe the next day, you can reflect back with them and say, maybe let's try not to do that next time. How do we work towards not making that mistake again next time? How do we do that? Right? And you have that conversation, but you don't love them any less. You don't berate them day after day after day, right? Because that's how you love somebody unconditionally. You love them in all of their glory. And so I think what happens to a lot of us, by the way, is that we feel like we have to, and we don't even know this consciously, but we feel like we have to earn our happiness. Like joy is something that comes at the end of trying, completing, and achieving something. And we don't realize that, like, we can have moments of joy in any given moment. And I think this is what a lot of the bypassers, a lot of the spirituality people out there struggle with, the type that I'm talking about, is that kind of duality. Is that you can feel, one thing over here, you can feel let down, like you hate your parent over here, and then you can simultaneously find a moment of joy over here and be thankful and grateful for something else over here. This kind of black and white thinking that happens a lot. You see it, I call it like bro spirituality. A lot of the, like, I know that, like, in the men's spaces particularly, I get a lot of the blokes and the guys there that get upset with me and the things that I say, right? Because they want this constant and consistent reframing. Now, I think reframing is really beneficial and useful. It helps us to be able to reframe our experiences and have an attempt to try and reframe our emotions even, right? I think there can be benefit in that. But actually, I think holding all of our perceived truths is where you want to land. So you don't have to go, like, because people say, you talk a lot about toxic parents and, you talk about all that kind of stuff. And like people will say that I keep people in victimhood, right? It's quite a clever way of bypassing the truth. Because what I would say is the people that say that I keep people in victimhood are the people that have skipped sitting with the true discomfort of what it is to be a victim. And so as a child, any negative experience that you have at the hands of your parents, you are a victim, right? My kids are sometimes the victim of the toxic traits that come out of my own trauma. My kids are the victim of that, right? So can we comprehend that fully in our own experience? we need to comprehend that fully so that we can then be able to move on. So there's an analogy that I've probably not spoken about it for a long time, but I used to use it a lot, right? This is what I think bro spirituality does a lot of, right? Imagine there's a room, stick with me because this feels weird at the beginning, but stick with me. Imagine there's a room and it's a blank canvas and your job is to make it the most amazing decored room on the planet, right? Somebody says to you, blank canvas, white walls, white floors, everything. You've got unlimited budget. You do whatever the fuck you want with this room. But just so you know, wedged under the floorboards in there in the corner behind the skirting board, quite hard to get to, is some fish, all right? Now you could walk in, and this is what I think bro spirituality does. It walks in and it goes, well, fuck the fish. We got unlimited budget. Let's just fill this room with positive things. And so bro spirituality goes, you know, that's buried over there. Let's reframe the shit out of that. And it goes out and it gets like, you know, the best wallpaper in the world, the best furniture from the best cabinet makers. They get the best scents from around the world. They source the best perfumes and the best fucking reed sticks and all of the furniture. They get like some indoor plants and they make this space. They drip diamonds from the ceiling, gold on the walls, yeah? And then they sit in there, and this is what will happen. You can sit in that room and bask and say, you could go on social media and go, look at this room, man. Look at this room, yeah? How incredible. Why would you not want this room? And it'd be hard to look at it and go, wow, I don't want that room. Especially if there's somebody over there that's pulled up all the floorboards, and that's as far as they've got at the moment, yeah? They might be bringing in some nice furniture, but they've pulled up the floorboards, the skirtings out, because they're getting that fish out, yeah? Right? They're doing the work. They're doing the work. But the bro spiritual people, they sit in there, sooner or later, the reed sticks, the fucking scents, the fine art, the furniture, it's all going to be for nothing. Because the piece of fish that they left there and they ignored and decided to just pour positivity on has now become rotten, and it's overpowered everything. And at some point, they're going to have to pull up that nice new carpet they got. They're going to have to get the gold off of the walls and move the diamonds out of the way so they can get in there and do the fucking work. And that's why I talk about the fish all the time. I talk about the rotten fish regularly and often, because until it's all gone and I don't know if it ever goes, the scent may never go. So you may need to fucking arrange the room in such a way that you can get there and do a little bit of work every now and then, because it's seeping out of the wood. So you might have to get back in there, sand the wood back or whatever, yeah? I mean, how far do you want to take the analogy, Josh? Fucking hell. But you understand what I'm saying. And I wonder if that feels like a bit of a natural place. What you won't understand and what you won't see, even if you're watching this on YouTube, you certainly won't if you're listening on whatever platform that you listen on, is I had a timer on the screen behind the camera telling me how long I'd been going for. And the screensaver's come on. So I've got no idea how long we've been here. I reckon it's been somewhere around about half an hour. But I have no time that I have decided that I want to be here. I just feel like when I naturally run out of steam is when each podcast will stop. So I'm going to bring this to a close. Listen, I can feel a part of me now that strongly wants to go, look, this, I promise you, this will get better as I get used to the format and I bring new ideas. Because what I will be doing is, like, when things have happened in my day-to-day life, or when things are happening in like popular culture and stuff like that, in future episodes, I just want to talk about them, like, you know, in a joking way or a fun way or a deep way, and just bring them all up. And that's the plan with future episodes. I'm also going to introduce an Ask Me thing. So I can say this to you now, but like, if you DM me on Instagram, any kind of voice note particularly, I'll play the voice notes out and then answer the questions. We're going to do that, but you can write them as well and we'll answer the questions. Any questions, they can be stupid questions, they can be about my work, they can be anything. Nothing's off the table, but ask me the questions. If you do it in a voice note, then I'll have it on my iPad and I'll just play it into the microphone and then I'll answer it, and I think that'll be banging. Be a banging little bit, and we'll finish each episode with that. So yeah, like we said at the beginning, This will probably be dysfunctional. Hopefully you've got a little bit of a insight into what it's like to be me, what it's like to live in my head. And if you haven't, come back next week, because once a week, hopefully, you're going to get a nice little insight into me and my head. I've been Josh Connolly, and this was definitely dysfunctional. I did tell you it would be dysfunctional, so thank you for sticking around till the end here. And if you have enjoyed this podcast, then please help me to grow Dysfunctional by sharing with your friends on social media. You can find me at Josh_FFW. And then wherever you're listening to this or watching this, please make sure that you've liked and subscribed, left us a 5-star review and a comment if your platform allows it. And I'll see you on the next one.